This is not your traditional story. I'm not gonna be portraying an image of myself so that you leave the video feeling, oh my god, poor woman, you know, she has no friends. Yes, there is a side to that, you know, sometimes having no friends can be difficult, I suppose, but I guess it depends of the type of person you are. I need to give you some sort of background. So if you don't mind this style of video, more relaxed, laid back, grab a drink of your preference and let's dive into it. I was raised in a patriarchal society and in a time that militarism was the government that was set in place. So it was a dictatorship essentially, and teenagers had no real freedom to do anything. And I was raised in a quite abusive small family, and I suffered psychological, emotional, and physical abuse. I couldn't really socialize, I couldn't really have friends. Essentially, until the age of 16, when my dad died, I lived pretty much mostly just going to school, home, and so on. I couldn't really go anywhere or really develop my social skills, if you would. And just as a side note, I am a recovering survivor of being exposed to narcissistic relationships. So those who know, you know what it's like and what it takes to recover from those relationships. Having said that, now you might or might not understand that when I reached the age of 17 and I was able to somehow escape the life that I was having, I think that's the best way I can put this. I had this view of the world that was very transactional. You see, to that point in my life, I was never really showing any respect, any value. I had no role models, and I was treated as if I was just a knighting that existed to serve others, to do things, and to clean the house, to look after someone's kid, or prepare food, whatever was required. So I wasn't really raised in a way that would instill in me a sense of self-worth, a sense of being a person who feels valued or feels like I'm a whole person. You all the time just being seen as an object that people just basically take advantage of. I think it's needless to say here that having come from that kind of environment and upbringing, I was a person who was perceived perhaps as very cold, and I had a tendency to see any interactions or relationships with others as a transaction, just as I was treated when I was at home. That's how I knew. I think there is a lot to say of the environment a child and a teenager is raised. Obviously, as we become a young adult, of course, we start to be exposed to the world, and hopefully we will be also exposed to experiences that will somehow help to shape us, right? But for me, I think my first few years of young adulthood, I don't know, from the age of like 17 to 22, I was very mistaken about how we're supposed to live life, and I think I took advantage of the fact that I was young and that I was somewhat attractive, and I think, yeah, I think I took advantage of relationships, and I would just try to see what was in for me, if you see what I'm saying. And I think you can see on my demeanor right now that is something that I don't necessarily think is the way to be about. But I think it's important for me to mention this here today. A lot of stories you hear on YouTube about people saying, I have no friends. People portray this image of coming from a position of, oh, I have no friends, and, you know, I'm just this amazing person, this person who did everything right. I don't think there are many individuals who come to YouTube and first give you a background in terms of to see where I am coming from when I tell more about my story and explain why nowadays I have no friends. And hopefully I will give you food for thought and also hope, because what I'm trying to portray here today is that you and me, we are out there. We are not perfect up to the age of our 20s. We are largely a product of the environment we were raised and the exposure we had in terms of the kind of parenting or the environment and how we were treated as an infant, as a child, and then as a teenager. And I think I wanted to highlight here that I didn't come to this world like, yeah, and I acted in ways that I necessarily think is the way you should treat other people. I think I was quite revolted. I had a lot of anger inside of me, and to a large extent, I took out on the world the abuse that I went through growing up. So years have passed. I ended up, unfortunately, getting married just before the age of 25 with a young man that was a narcissist. Another important point I want to make here is that when we are raised by narcissistic individuals and then we go in the world, and if we don't have opportunity to heal and to recover, it's quite likely that we're going to end up again in a relationship of some nature with a friend, colleague at work, or God forbid, in a romantic relationship with a narcissist. And oh man, that marriage didn't last long. It was an experience that have broke me, and it was one of the worst experiences I had in my life. It has broken me, and I was absolutely on the floor when it sounds now, I look back and it feels like, wow, we didn't stay married for long. Yeah, at the age of 27, I managed to get a divorce when I realized that I was gonna end up dead if I stayed on that relationship. When I ended that relationship and I tried to build my life again, I also, too late perhaps, I was already 27, 28, I started to reconsider my approach to life, reconsider the way I had been treating people and the way I had been treating myself. Because there is a point here that I want to make, that I think, again, people don't talk a lot about the fact that the people who act out in ways that are not necessarily the best, like being transactional with the relationship, they have really deep wounds. They need healing, and they need to understand that they have an intrinsic value within themselves just because they exist. And I didn't have that, you see? So here I am at the age of 27, restarting my life from zero, because up to that point I felt, looking back, I had no emotional literacy. So from that point onwards is when I actually start my healing journey. Nowadays I'm 52, and over the years I have gone through self-healing. I have read numerous self-help books, and I start to really understand my role on everything that was happening in my life. And yes, of course I had to come to terms with my past. I had to learn to, took me many years, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna sit here, I just forgave. It took me a long time to be able to forgive what's happened to me in the past, and I actually had to physically move very far from my family of origin. And I think everybody has their own journey on that sense. And me having to move physically far just was my way of trying to divorce myself from that experience and give myself a fair chance to work on my emotional wounds, work on my self-worth, learn to develop emotional intelligence, and gain an understanding about what does it mean to be in this world as a fully functioning individual. Because I think that's another thing that not many people talk about. We come out from those relationships, and I think we just throw it out there and go to the working life. And sometimes those are those colleagues that give us grief because they never acknowledge what they have to work on themselves. So sometimes they don't even want to work on themselves. They just then they are unaware, oblivious, right, that they have issues. I have been that person, and then I also have been on the other side of the fence, understanding that I didn't want to be that person anymore, that I wanted to be a person who understood my role on my own life, to take responsibility about healing myself. I think, the whole thing about self-help, is self-help. You need to do the work. You need to take responsibility for your own healing, from your own issues. And you need to look honestly to your actions in the past and establish and have a radical acceptance that what you've done, if you have opportunity to go back and ask and say sorry to anyone who you have hurt or you have offended. I have tried to do that. I tried to make amends, and even though I wouldn't necessarily want to have a relationship with certain individuals, those that I felt that I had wronged, I have had a try. I had gave a fair try to approach and to ask and to say sorry and to simply give a chance for that person to free themselves from any hurt about the interaction that we had and so on. But on the other hand, in terms of my own forgiveness towards those individuals who hurted me, half of them already died. So I had to do a symbolic exercise of forgiveness, which I'm gonna say very honestly, I had to repeat many times over the years. Because I think that's another thing that not many people talk about, is that sometimes you say, I have forgiven. That's it. And you're still walking around full of pain in your heart and still hunted by those memories and so on. I think there is a point when you know you have managed to forgive and accept and come to terms with your past and the way people treated you, that you remember and you no longer have an emotional charge about. You're able to remember and look simply as a memory, and you no longer feel triggered. That is a very key point to say to yourself that you managed to overcome. Now, you're probably thinking, is she ever gonna talk about the fact that she doesn't have friends and why? Yes, I am. And thanks for being patient with me. I had to give you this background. I had to mention all those points because otherwise it doesn't make sense, I think. I don't know. I'm a person who always wants to know the context on things. And if you haven't noticed yet by my demeanor and the way I speak, I am an introvert, right? So I'm a person who tends to recharge my energy spending time alone. And if I spend time too close to too many people, I tend to get quite drained and tired, and my energy levels really just goes down very quickly. So over the years, after I've gone through my healing process, I have managed to create a few healthy relationships, and I have had friends. But I think there is a lot to say about the fact that there is a big difference between being alone and being lonely. And you can sometimes have friends and have a large family around you, but you do feel lonely because you feel like you are changing, you're evolving, life is passing by, and no one seems to relate to you. No one seems to be in the same wavelength that you are. Do you know what I mean? So you feel actually lonely. So there are different levels of saying, I have no friends. You might have a lot of people around you, but you don't really have any friends, or you actually have no person around you. You live a life that is quite isolated. And I'm going to address both points because I have been in the two situations. Coming back to what I was saying, after I went through the healing period, I have managed to create positive relationships at workplace and with colleagues, and also during training when I was studying later on in my 30s. and then I moved to the UK, and then I really managed to kind of meet some interesting individuals. However, there is something about when you are a person, like a conscious person who try to understand other people's perspective and also see the best in other people, I think you also will attract in some point individuals who are inclined to just take and not necessarily give. There is a lot of individuals out there who I met on my time who would love to spend time with me to just share all that's going on in their life. I would be that person that people go to confide their issues and so on, which is fine. I used to be always happy to help and listen and give that support. But I felt over time that I was attracting too many people like that, and it wasn't really reciprocal. Those individuals that I was meeting, they didn't have much interest to know how I was doing, how I was feeling. And then over time, I started to realize that I went too far to the other end of the scale. So coming back here, and now you're gonna understand why I told you about my upbringing, how I was when I was young. So when I was young, I was very utilitarian about my relationships, and I regretted quite deeply for having been like that through the period I was healing and trying to develop and become a better person and evolve emotionally and so on and so forth, right? So I got in touch with my emotions, and I became this person who tried not to be judgmental towards others, right? Because I realized that none of us are perfect, that we all have our blind spots, and who am I to judge anyone? So because I became that kind of person and trying to be always very understanding and so on, I started to attract, unfortunately, also individuals who wouldn't really be willing to get engaged on in a give and take that is required for a healthy relationship. And what does that tell you? This means that although I had worked a lot on myself, that would have been some almost 20 years of personal development, personal therapy. At that point that I'm sharing here, I will be around in my 40s, and I would have had already qualifications in the field of psychotherapy. The training in psychotherapy is brutal, and you can't really hide much. You have to go through psychoanalysis yourself during the training. And I thought that I had uncovered everything that I had to uncover, and I was, yes, I had a few still rough edges like everybody else, but I was okay. But you know what? The understanding that I still was attracting a certain kind of individual to my life that were essentially takers was start to ring all sorts of alarm bells around me. I realized that here I am after spending large number of years working on myself, and I still hadn't really fully healed my self-esteem. And I'm just gonna say this here, I have met colleagues in the field of psychotherapy that they are wounded, they haven't fully healed, and I don't necessarily think you need to be fully healed to be able to work with other individuals, but you need to have enough awareness of your own issues so that you, hopefully, if you're projecting into anyone, you're aware of it. In my case, I wasn't aware that I still had self-worth issues, and it took me a long time after that to really understand the whole process of reparenting myself. You see, because this is the thing, I didn't really have adequate parenting. So my inner child never really received love, care, any of the things that you would normally expect a child to receive. So only at the age of over 40s that I started to look into this, to healing my inner child deeply and accept and understand my shadows or the aspects of myself that I wasn't necessarily so proud of, which we all have. Thought processes about other people, about ourselves, about the world that we sometimes don't even share because maybe they are too critical, maybe they are not very nice. So everyone have a shadow side, whether you admit or not. So I, again, had to go through that whole process. At the time, I was working in this organization, and looking back, it's like, oh my God, it was just horrendous. I don't know why I stayed for so long. And in the team I worked, I was like a scapegoat. I was very different from everybody else there. And they were all somewhat against me, if you would. Like, they would gossip about me, you name it. And it's interesting, isn't it, that that had to happen at the time for me to realize that, you know, Joanne, you have some self-worth issues here, you know. And then I decided to take it seriously after having like an emotional breakdown because I couldn't cope anymore in that environment, that I had to heal. And by having that realization, I also realized that I had to move away from the people that I knew at the time. I knew a lot of people and I interacted with a lot of people, but I was incredibly alone. One looking from the outside would say I had friends. I was not a lonely person, but I was incredibly lonely, depressed and unhappy. So at that time, this was again mid-40s, I decided to walk away and just basically dissolve most of the relationships that I had around me, because I realized they were mostly toxic, which is terrible to look back and realize that I allowed that to happen to myself. But then again, hey, if that's what it takes for you to realize that you need to really look after yourself and that you need to learn to value the person you are just because you exist, so be it. So I remember back in the day, I decided then that I was going to spend some time not really investing in getting to know new people, if you see what I'm saying, not engaging and seeking friendships. This was towards my late 40s. And after that, I had another job. I got to know colleagues that were nice and so on, but they were acquaintances. I still was in a process of understanding and learning about my intrinsic value and understanding that it doesn't matter the mistakes I have made, that I am worth it regardless. So I have been on this journey of having no friends since the age of 48, I want to say. And although I am at the moment married, I have been in a long-term relationship for quite some time. And of course I engage in interactions with the family of my husband. And that's about, I don't really have friends. Now, why I'm saying this, which is a very different story, I understand, from the majority of people probably out there. I want to highlight that me seeking to heal my self-esteem and understand how to relate to myself and understand that the most important relationship that we are gonna ever have in our lives is the relationship with ourselves. Once I realized that, I stopped really caring or feeling lonely when I realized that I had no friends. I realized that, you know, that I actually enjoy quite a lot spending time on my own company. I enjoy going for a run, going for walks outside. I enjoy journaling. And I also decided that if I allow anyone into my life again as a friend, it will be someone who resonates with my person and who actually likes me. Not because they want to have someone just to listen to them. I will only engage in relationships, in friendships, if I do find that. And you know what? I'm not too concerned. I think I have come to a point in life that I'm really enjoying being where I am in terms of being on my own. Now, a few points I want to mention here in terms of being in the age of 52. When we go through life, our experiences, our personalities sometimes tend to change. As you can see in this video here, I started one way as a young person and I couldn't be more different right now at the age of 52 from the person I was at the age of 17, 18. And we change, we all change because of the people we're exposed to, the relationships and environments and so on, and life experiences in itself, you know. We make mistakes, and if we're lucky enough, we learn from those mistakes. And now that insight guides us, right? And people in our life, the people we meet, hardly ever they also will stay the same. So this is another thing I noticed, because I have moved countries and so on, and work in different places. You have sometimes those groups of people that you meet that is quite nice and engaging, and you learn something from them. Hopefully you will also have somehow added to their life as well. But then you move on you know. I remember there was a point here in my 40s that people my age would be in a certain point in their life, and I was in a completely different stage, and therefore we didn't have much in common. And that in itself will be one of the reasons why sometimes relationships tend to fade and people move on and you lose contact. People move to another country, so life changes. Individuals who have children who grow up, and then they, when you are in the age of 50, they are going to university, or they move into another country sometimes, or moving to live with someone else to share a house or so on. So all that can lead to a person feeling like they don't have friends, because you spend so much time of your life dedicating your time and efforts and energy into raising children or in looking after other individuals, and then when they no longer need you, right, you suddenly notice that you didn't have the chance to spend time nurturing the relationship with yourself, which is supposed to be your best friend, and relationship with other individuals that you can call friend. So I think this video is a little bit unorthodox. It's not the usual video that you're gonna see out there talking about I have no friends. I don't have social anxiety. I am not a shy person. I am an introvert. This means I am quiet. I can act extroverted if I need to be. I have done that a lot at work, in workplaces when was required of me. But I will speak if I feel like I have something to say. And if not, and often will be more of observant. I tend to observe more than speak. I hope that this video somehow give you some insight in terms of a different perspective of someone who doesn't have friends, who is not necessarily struggling. Now, I have a question for you. What do you think about the story I have shared with you? Do you have any thoughts about having friends? Not having friends? What kind of personality you have? Are you a person who feel like you really need to have friends at all stages of your life, or you are more of a lone wolf who can thrive as well being alone? I think I'm a little bit of a lone wolf. I do like people, but I prefer sometimes spending time alone. And that's how I'm feeling at the moment. Whether this would ever change, I don't know. Thanks for watching my video, and I hope to see you in the next one.